Welcome back to Avoidant Decoded. If you truly want to understand the silent patterns behind distance, emotional withdrawal, and what actually works with avoidant behavior, you're in the right place. And if you're ready to go deeper, don't forget to join our membership, where we break down these dynamics in ways most people never see. You might think sending more messages will bring them closer to you, but it doesn't work that way. In fact, every extra text often pushes them a little further away without you even realizing it. No one really explains this clearly. No one tells you why an avoidant suddenly becomes distant right when things seem to be going well. And most people never show you what actually works when it comes to communicating with them, until now. Here's what most people don't understand. The normal relationship advice you've learned doesn't apply here. What works with someone who is open and emotionally secure can completely backfire with an avoidant. The same things that usually build connection can actually trigger distance. If you've been treating them like anyone else, you've probably already noticed the pattern. You reach out with warmth and they pull away. You try to get closer and they create space. You send something thoughtful and instead of getting warmth back, you get silence. You give more of your time, energy, and emotion and somehow feel like you're receiving less and less in return. That pattern changes starting now. What you're about to learn are 4 specific ways of texting that actually work. Not vague advice, not just give them space. These are practical approaches based on how avoidant attachment really works. Once you understand how their nervous system responds to emotional closeness, everything shifts. You stop reacting emotionally and start communicating with awareness. But before we get into that, there's something important you need to understand because it changes how you see them completely. Avoidants are not distant because they don't feel. In many cases, they feel very deeply. The difference is how they handle those feelings. At some point in their past, closeness became linked with discomfort, pressure, or even pain. Depending on someone started to feel unsafe. Needing someone became something that led to disappointment. So instead of leaning in, they learned to step back. That distance you feel is not a lack of care. It's a form of protection. They build emotional boundaries that feel like walls. And behind those walls, they're still aware. They notice you. They notice your energy, often more than they show. But the moment things start to feel too intense, something inside them reacts. It's not a conscious decision to hurt you. It's an automatic response that says, this is getting too close, and closeness has hurt before. So the real question isn't how to make them like you more. The real question is how to communicate without triggering that withdrawal response. How do you stay connected without making them feel pressured? How do you show presence without overwhelming them? It comes down to a few key approaches. Before going further, pause for a second and name what you're feeling about your situation in one word. Maybe it's confusion, exhaustion, hope, or uncertainty. That awareness matters more than you think. Now let's get into it. The first approach is what you can think of as a no-pressure check-in. To understand why this works, you have to understand what usually causes them to shut down. When an avoidant receives a message that carries emotional weight, even in a subtle way, it can feel like there's an expectation placed on them. It might not be obvious pressure, but it still feels like they need to respond in a certain way or within a certain time. Even a simple, "How are you?" can feel heavy if it carries hidden expectation. So, instead of adding weight, you remove it completely. It sounds something like this. "Hey, no rush to reply. I just saw this and thought of you." Then you attach something light and relevant, maybe a meme they'd enjoy, a quick update about something you both talked about, or a photo connected to a shared moment. And then you leave it there. No question that demands an answer. No emotional message like, "I miss you." No hidden pressure. Just a simple signal, "I thought of you." This works because it removes the feeling of obligation, and obligation is what triggers their need to pull away. Avoidants don't usually run from people. They run from pressure and emotional responsibility. The moment they feel like they owe a response or have to match your emotional energy, they instinctively create distance. But when there's no pressure, their system relaxes. And when that happens, they're much more likely to respond, not always instantly, but more consistently over time. It works even better when the message is specific. If you reference something personal they once mentioned, it shows attention without demanding anything in return. It shows you remember, without making them feel responsible. And for someone who is used to emotional interactions feeling heavy, that combination stands out. The second approach is what you could call a confident, low-investment reach-out. This only works if your energy is genuine. You can't just copy the words. You have to actually feel grounded and secure within yourself. Avoidants are very sensitive to emotional inconsistency. If your words say one thing, but your energy says another, they'll notice. It might sound like this. Today was kind of strange. You would have laughed at this. Or, this place reminded me of you. You'd either love it or hate it. These messages are short, simple, and complete on their own. Notice what's happening here. You're sharing a moment from your life. You're including them in a light, natural way. You're showing that you understand their personality, but you're not asking anything from them. There's no question, no need for validation, no expectation for a reply to complete the interaction. You close the message yourself. That's what makes it feel safe instead of demanding. It creates a moment of connection without pulling them in too hard. You're simply letting them be part of your world for a second, then giving space again. And that matters more than most people realize. This works because avoidants are drawn to people who genuinely have their own life. Not people who say they're independent, but people who actually live that way. When you share something from your day naturally, something real that happened, you're communicating more than just the message itself. You're showing that your life is moving, that you're present, and that your world doesn't revolve around whether or not they respond. Actively engaged in their own life, and that's what shifts how you're seen. An avoidant doesn't usually move closer to someone who seems emotionally centered around them, constantly waiting, constantly available. That kind of energy, even when it's not spoken, starts to feel heavy. It feels like responsibility. And responsibility is exactly what makes them step back. But when someone is clearly grounded in their own routine, their own direction, their own experiences, something changes. When it's obvious you're not sitting around waiting for a reply, you become different in their eyes. You're no longer someone they feel the need to escape from. You become someone who exists beyond them, someone with their own gravity, someone worth paying attention to. There's another layer to this, and it's your tone. It's not about sounding impressive or trying too hard. It's about being calm, natural, and not needy. There's no attempt to pull a reaction out of them, no hidden expectation underneath your words, just a simple, genuine moment from your day, shared without emotional pressure attached. That quiet confidence is what makes it work. At no point are you trying to prove your worth. You're not performing. You're not chasing attention. You're communicating like someone whose life already feels full. The third approach is what I call the open door callback, and it's one of the most overlooked ways to communicate with an avoidant. This applies when something between you has paused or feels unfinished. Maybe they pulled away. Maybe plans never happened. Maybe there was momentum that suddenly stopped, leaving an awkward silence that neither of you addressed. Most people react in one of two ways. They either over-explain, sending long emotional messages trying to figure everything out, or they shut down completely and wait, often building frustration in the process. This approach does neither. It sounds like this. Still up for that coffee sometime if you feel like it. No pressure. Or, that place we talked about is still on my list. Let me know if you ever want to go. What makes this powerful is how it's structured. You're referring back to something that already existed between you. You're acknowledging the connection without forcing it forward, and you're leaving real space for them to choose. There's no emotional demand, no hidden frustration, no urgency disguised as something casual, just openness without pressure. For an avoidant, this feels different. It doesn't trigger their fear that closeness will turn into obligation or conflict. Instead, it shows them something they rarely experience, connection that exists without pressure. That alone can shift how they feel about interacting with you. It shows that you're not reacting emotionally, not punishing distance, not closing yourself off because things feel uncertain. The connection is still there, but it's not being used as leverage. And that kind of steadiness stands out. But there's one condition here. This has to be real. If you send a message like this while secretly feeling frustrated or trying to make them feel guilty, it won't work. Avoidants are very sensitive to what's underneath the words. They may not say it, but they feel it. So this only works when you genuinely mean it. when you're actually okay with space, when you're not forcing an outcome, when you're not pretending to be calm while internally spiraling. Otherwise, the message loses clarity and becomes just noise. The fourth approach isn't just one message, it's a pattern. I call it intentional absence. It starts with a light, easy interaction, something natural, something engaging, something that doesn't carry emotional weight. And then comes the part most people struggle with, real distance. Not fake silence where you're still checking your phone every few minutes, not pulling away just to get a reaction, but actual disengagement, going back to your own life, putting your attention into your routine, your work, your interests, your people. You stop waiting. And in that space, something begins to shift. Avoidants are used to controlling distance. It's how they feel safe. When things get too close, they step back to regulate themselves. But when the other person is no longer constantly available, no longer predictable in the same way, that dynamic changes. It introduces something unexpected, absence that isn't reactive. And that creates curiosity, not manipulation, not forced uncertainty, just the natural reality of two people living their own lives. Questions start to form quietly. Did something change? Are they busy? Are they less focused on me? And this isn't about creating anxiety, it's about restoring balance. When one person is always available and the other isn't, the dynamic becomes unstable. But when both people have space, movement, and independence, the connection can breathe. When you come back after that space, it shouldn't feel like you're trying to fix anything or make up for silence. It should feel easy, natural, like you simply thought of them and decided to share something. No explanations, no urgency, no emotional weight attached to the gap. That combination, distance followed by ease, is what creates a healthy rhythm. It matches how avoidants are wired. Closeness, then space, then connection again, without pressure building in between. But none of this works if your internal state is unstable. That's the part most people overlook. You can learn every message, every structure, every technique. But if your mind is still focused on outcomes, still waiting for validation, still analyzing every reply, it will show. Not in what you say, but in the energy behind it. People feel that, even through simple texts. That's why the real shift isn't just in your words, it's in where your attention goes when you're not texting them. If your emotions are tied completely to one person's responses, then everything starts to feel heavy. Silence feels like rejection, delays feel like abandonment, neutral behavior feels personal, and that's where it becomes exhausting. Avoidant dynamics make this even stronger because of the push and pull. Moments of closeness followed by distance create a loop that keeps you mentally hooked. You start overthinking, overinvesting, staying emotionally attached even when nothing is happening. But that cycle can be broken, not by controlling them, but by slowly bringing your focus back to yourself. You do that by putting your attention into your own life again, your goals, your routines, your friendships, your interests. Not as a strategy, but because your life actually deserves that space. These things aren't distractions from connection. They're what make connection healthy. And when that shift becomes real, something changes. You stop trying to look like you have a full life, and you actually start living one. That difference is powerful, because what an avoidant responds to most isn't intensity or pressure. It's someone who clearly exists on their own, someone who isn't waiting, someone who isn't emotionally paused, hoping for the next message, someone who has direction, movement, and priorities that don't revolve around them. When that becomes visible, your presence feels different, not because you're trying to stand out, but because you naturally do. And it's important to understand this clearly. Avoidant attachment isn't about being cold or not caring. In most cases, it comes from earlier experiences. For many avoidants, emotional closeness didn't feel safe growing up. Maybe the people they depended on were inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes distant, sometimes warm, sometimes unavailable. Maybe their emotions weren't fully received. Maybe they were dismissed or ignored. So they adapted. They learned something quietly but deeply. Depending on others isn't safe. And from that belief, they built a way of protecting themselves that now shows up as distance. When closeness has historically brought confusion or hurt, distance starts to feel like the safer option. Independence turns into a way to stay in control, and relying only on yourself becomes part of who you are. Over time, this isn't just something you do, it becomes automatic. That's why people with avoidant patterns can seem calm and put together on the outside. It's not that they don't feel things deeply, it's that they've learned to manage those feelings internally instead of expressing them in vulnerable ways. Beneath that control, the desire for connection is still there, it just gets tangled up with fear. So they often find themselves in a push-pull dynamic, wanting closeness, but reacting to it like it's something threatening. This is where patience matters, but not the kind where you abandon your own needs or wait endlessly. It's about being steady and grounded, showing up in a way that doesn't chase, but also doesn't punish, staying emotionally balanced even when there's distance, communicating, "I'm here," without making your presence dependent on their behavior. That kind of calm stability stands out, especially to someone who is sensitive to pressure or feels easily overwhelmed by emotional expectations. At the same time, it's important to be honest about something. Not everyone with avoidant tendencies is ready to grow or engage differently. Some people aren't aware of their patterns yet, and others simply aren't in a place to change. No matter how thoughtful your communication is, you can't make up for a lack of effort on their side. That's not a reflection of you, it's just the reality. Staying stuck in something one-sided doesn't help either person. These approaches aren't just about getting a reply from them, they're about helping you stay centered. Sending a message without pressure teaches you to let go of outcomes. Keeping your investment balanced reminds you to maintain your own life outside of the connection. Leaving the door open without forcing anything reduces tension, and giving space helps you stop focusing all your energy on someone who isn't consistently showing up. Even if they never change, you do. And that's what really matters for healthier relationships moving forward. It's just as important to understand what to avoid. Most issues in these situations don't come from one big mistake, but from repeated emotional reactions. For example, sending multiple follow-up messages when there's no reply. One message is communication. Two can start to feel like pressure. Three or more often comes across as chasing. And in avoidant dynamics, chasing usually leads to more distance, not connection. Give your message room to breathe. Not as a tactic, but because real communication needs space. Also, try not to use texting as a place to unload everything you're feeling. When anxiety or confusion builds up, it's tempting to send a long message explaining it all. It might feel like it will fix things, but in these dynamics, it often pushes the other person further away. Instead, process those emotions somewhere safe first, through journaling, reflection, or talking to someone you trust. Then communicate when you feel clear and grounded, not when your emotions are at their peak. Another thing to keep in mind, don't respond to their silence with punishment. If they pull away and then come back, reacting with coldness might feel justified, but it reinforces their belief that closeness leads to negative consequences. That belief is part of what keeps the cycle going. A calm, steady response works better. Acknowledge them with simple warmth. No overdoing it, no shutting down, just consistency. That's what gradually shifts the dynamic. Timing also plays a role. Messages sent late at night can feel heavier emotionally. Early morning texts might come across as expectation if they're too open-ended. Midday tends to be more neutral, easier to respond to without pressure. After any kind of distance or tension, giving things a little time before reaching out can make a big difference. What feels like long enough to you might still feel intense to them. Rushing usually leads to more withdrawal. Giving space first, then reconnecting in a light, simple way creates a better chance for things to reset. Looking at the bigger picture, caring about someone with avoidant tendencies isn't wrong, but it does require honesty. You have to be honest about what they're actually capable of giving, honest about what you need emotionally, and honest about whether there's real effort coming from both sides, or if you're the only one adjusting and trying to make it work. No communication style can replace mutual effort. The goal here isn't to figure someone out perfectly or get them to respond a certain way. It's to help you communicate more calmly and clearly while staying connected to your own life. Because the real shift happens when you stop making someone else's unpredictability the center of your emotional world. When that happens, relationships start to feel like a choice, not something driven by anxiety or pursuit. At the core of all this is a simple truth. You can't force someone to be emotionally available if they're not ready. What you can control is how you show up, how you communicate, and how you protect your own emotional well-being. These approaches aren't magic solutions, they're just healthier ways of interacting. They lower pressure, reduce triggers, and allow space for genuine connection without overwhelm. Used in the right way, they help you move out of anxious patterns and into something more steady and intentional. But the deeper takeaway matters more than any specific message. Avoidant behavior isn't about not caring, it's about fear of closeness, shaped by past experiences. Understanding that can help you feel compassion, but it doesn't remove each person's responsibility to grow. Some people will eventually become more secure and open. Others won't be able to meet you with consistency or emotional presence. That's where your clarity matters. Your role isn't to chase, analyze, or keep reshaping yourself to maintain a connection. Your role is to stay grounded, communicate respectfully, and pay attention to what's actually happening, not just what you hope could happen, because no perfectly timed message can replace mutual effort. The real goal isn't controlling how they respond, it's staying in control of your own emotional center. When you stop revolving around uncertainty and start investing in your own life, everything shifts. You become less reactive, more stable, and naturally drawn to healthier connections. At that point, it's no longer about getting someone to stay or reply. It's about recognizing who can meet you where you are and who can't. Because the healthiest relationships are never the ones you have to chase. They're the ones where both people show up, meet each other halfway, and create something steady without confusion or losing themselves along the way. This is not about mastering the perfect text or unlocking some hidden formula to make someone stay. It's about becoming steady within yourself. When you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and start showing up with calm clarity, everything shifts. You create space where connection can exist without pressure, where presence feels safe instead of demanding. And whether they meet you there or not, you walk away with something far more powerful: self-respect, emotional balance, and the ability to build connections that are mutual, not one-sided. That is where real transformation begins.